This is Paul Levy, and this short discussion is a follow-up to a little talk I gave about the problem of what happens when the tasks that teachers set students to do in an online learning context are simply not carried out by the students or are done in a very minimal and diluted way. And part of the explanation for that I offered was the idea that when we attempt to ignite, to stimulate the will of our students from a camera, from a live video conference or a recorded video, the problem is that we become a little bit shade-like. We become a little bit like ghosts, and we simply don't have the power to motivate in the way we do if we were in a physical room. And teachers will already know that that can be the case with students anyway in a physical room, that by the time our words have transferred into the minds of our students, there's already been a diluting process, that our motivation, our will for something to happen isn't shared by our students. And particularly when they get home, if there are lots and lots of other more interesting things to do, then this work goes on the back burner. And so some people argue for less homework, and some people argue for more homework these days because of those distractions. And a lot of it's down to the support of parents, and there's all these kinds of debates. But I just want to get to the fundamentals of this, and particularly when we are having to teach online, that's not something we want to do, for example, during the coronavirus crisis. But also just generally in a world that is practicing blended learning more and is mixing physical classroom teaching with virtual classroom teaching. Now, students can often feel disempowered simply by being given orders. When we give ourselves orders, of course, we feel more empowered usually than if someone else tells us what to do. And that process usually will weaken the response of another person who's being told to do something online, but that person isn't physically present. So it's kind of like you're a newsreader. It's kind of like you're an image that moves, but you're not physically there. So even that possibility of your physical charisma having a kind of effect, an impact, which, you know, when we're setting students things to do for their betterment is a benevolent impact, it can still come across as something that's taking away the freedom of that student to do something else of their own free will. Now, that lack of free will can be depressing. It can depress the motivational quality of the will, and the will can be strong, and when it is, we tend to be self-motivated. And our attempts to motivate others, leaving them in freedom rather than feeling that demotivation of being told, requires us to interest them, requires us to inspire them. And that can still work in a physical classroom, and teachers often report of how that can also work digitally as well. But it can be harder when there's lots and lots of distractions, and children are being taught online by teachers who, you know, only recently might have been in the physical classroom where they felt their presence in a more real way. And so what I suggested in that previous discussion, and it's still at the heart of this, is that I think the one thing that we can put across is an invitation, or it may be an order for the students to make a choice. And that nature of choice making, we feel more empowered. We feel more power because we are free to choose. Now, we might still be in the context of, I have to get this task done, but suddenly we will experience this as, but I've got some choice. I can direct this. And that enables us to actually be in the physical room, the place where we're at. And now we become the instigators of a will activity that isn't just about complying very directly and simply with something we've been told to do. And so that is when a teacher may say, you can choose to do this in different ways. And it could be, if, as I mentioned, it could be if it's in English or reading, it could be that you get a choice of things to read, stories to read. It could be if it's in maths that there's 5 or different things here and you can choose in what order you do them, or you could just choose to do 3 of them. And as long as we can still meet our pedagogical objectives, giving the students more choice means that they have a physical world experience of choice. Therefore, at that moment, it is their will force that could be, in a lot of cases, at least as strong as they might experience the teacher when they're physically present. Now, of course, there's an assumption here, therefore, that the digital world is less strong in terms of will. Well, it certainly shows evidence that we can give our will up to it, and that is when you get digital addiction. So it could also be that in the other direction, it's not that we become addicted to it. It's simply that by the time I've got this across to you and ask you to give up smoking, or ask you to do a task, or ask you to do something that I want you to do, that I am just a head on a screen. I am just pixels, and that doesn't have a sense of visceral reality that the physical world may have for a lot of people. It's not true of everybody, we're all different, but overall, the suggestion here is that somehow we need the students' experience of their own will to be one where they feel empowered and not disempowered. And to do that, they need to be making the choice in a very present way, not in a way where the will seems to be reaching from a screen towards them. And it could just be that those pixels drop on the floor somewhere in the middle.